Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here. I'm today with a Toonami's news update here on October 20th, 2020. Now, the first big thing of news, as you can see right here, I'm going to lead with is that we do have Toonami's new schedule for November 7th, 2020. Now, and this was kind of a big event on Toonami's Facebook. They posted this caption along with the schedule. Bust out your planners. Toonami's got some announcements to make on November 7th. Sword Art Online, Assassination War of the Underworld returns to the block at 12:30, followed by the Season 2 premiere of Fire Force at 1, followed by another premiere for Jimaseto Death Beats at 2 a.m. Check out the full lineup below and prepare yourself for Toonami every Saturday night from midnight to 3:30 a.m. Now, one little correction I want to, not really correction, one little thing I want to note here, which is really the big news in this, is the fact that it's interesting they mentioned it's like, oh, Sword Art Online World of the Underworld's returning, but then to specify for Fire Force, it's the premiere of Season 2. Now, I like to say here is that Aniplex USA, they, on their Twitter, they clarified that the episodes starting to air on November 7th are of the new core, the final core of War of the Underworld. So War of the Underworld Part 2 is going to be airing, so it is new episodes. And I actually noticed this today. I noticed today that if you take shows that's dub premiere was on Toonami, not on a streaming service first, but put on Toonami in 2020, the list would be Sword Art Online Alicization War of the Underworld, and then Sword Art Online Alicization War of the Underworld 2. And that's the entire list so far. And be like, oh, what about Fire Force? Well, season 2 new episodes are already streaming on Funimation. So that's there. And really, any other one that's like, well, what about this? It's aired on Funimation. It's streaming on Funimation before it gets to Toonami. So I just find it to be really interesting, since at the point Aniplex doesn't have their own streaming service. As far as I can tell, they kind of just shop it off their shows to the highest bidder. Like for example, Aniplex did Nisekoi, and Nisekoi I just recently watched on Hulu. So yeah, like stuff like that. And again, it's just something interesting there about Aniplex USA's game plan. And also another little kind of sidebar about Aniplex. I've noticed, I believe this is my personal opinion. You can agree or disagree with me. But in terms of the shows I have seen, the ones that have been distributed by Aniplex seem to be the best ones. Like, it's obvious to be like, oh, Kill a Kill or Promise Neverland. But again, Sword Art Online, I feel like, has really turned a corner with Alicization, and especially so for War of the Underworld, where it's kind of become the prodigal son of anime, in my opinion. Going from like this like glitzy but low quality that you have from Sword Art Online and Sword Art Online 2, but it actually getting serious and actually being like good and actually feeling like it's doing a lot more effort now. But again, that's a bit of a sidebar. But nevertheless, back to the main plot here, which is November 7th, Toonami new schedule. And if you've and you can probably see the schedule here. Midnight we have Super, 12:30 we have War of the Underworld Part 2, 1 we have Fire Force, 1:30 we have The Ass Room, 2 o'clock we have Death Beats, 2:30 Ship It In, and 3 o'clock Demon Slayer. And if you have a good eye, you'll notice that we have one little thing missing. Black Clover is not on the schedule. This is to be expected. Toonami is only like an episode or two behind where Funimation is. So I think they're just going to give that a rest for a few weeks. And then probably when we have another major schedule change, Black Clover will probably be back on, probably around 2 o'clock. I'm expecting that will happen in 7 weeks after this schedule when Death Beat ends. That's just kind of my prediction for that. So that means with Christmas marathons and stuff, we'll probably be seeing Black Clover again right around the start of the new year. So if you're a Black Clover fan, that's what I would expect in terms of it being on Toonami. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you look at the schedule, I definitely agree with having War of the Underworld Part 2 early in the block. War of the Underworld was getting pretty solid ratings in the follow-up spot to, at the time, My Hero Academia. But at the time, you have My Hero Academia with new episodes, which actually got much higher ratings than this current rerun run of Dragon Ball Super. That's probably going to have a negative impact on War of the Underworld's ratings. And then after that, I mean, you have Fire. When's the last time we had two quote unquote new shows back to back like this? At least having their Toonami debuts like this, and isn't a show that's like 10 years old like Assassination Classroom. I mean, it's been a long time. But again, I feel like even though it's definitely an improved schedule of what we've had the past few months, it's That's just small potatoes. It's like, well, it's better than this pretty poor schedule, but I still feel like this is a bit below some of the better schedules in Toonami history, especially in the Adult Swim era of Toonami. But nonetheless, I can't really point at anything scheduled and say I disagree with this. I disagree with that. Maybe I would actually flip flop Assassination Classroom with Fire Force, since Assassination Classroom has actually kind of built this thing of a following, which I'm kind of surprised we got. I thought it really just reeked of filler material, like, oh, we need to fill 30 minutes of a slot. But I've seen a lot of people really follow this show, especially after coming to Toonami. And maybe, like, I've had a theory, and I'm going to go into it when I cover the actual ratings in a moment, that Assassination Classroom has an argument for being a leadoff show in Toonami. And since I mentioned the ratings, might as well go to them right now. And of course, Toonami, I'm going to cover their ratings from October 17th, 2020. Let's start at the top of the block. Holy Calamavote got a .16. The Eric Andre Sneak Peek Special got a .13. Dragon Ball at a .13. JoJo at a .14. The Ass Rim at a .15. Fire Force at a .14. Shippuden at a .14. And the Demon Slayer at a .13. These, I'm pretty sure that, with the exception of marathon weeks, which don't count because they're anomalies, I think this is actually, I'm not even hyperbolizing here when I say these are the worst ratings in Toonami's history. And I look at this, and the more I analyze it, the more I really come to the conclusion that this is just Holy Calamavote's fault. You would be like, but it had the higher ratings, and everything had lower than it. Well, here's the thing. Nielsen. Nielsen is weird, in which it does its ratings by picking up how many people are watching during commercial breaks. And I don't know when they could have found a commercial break in Holy Calamavote because it was commercial free. And my theory is that the commercial break they took was the lead into Calamavote, so around 10:50, or around actually 11:57 p.m. or so. Naturally, this is going to be high because I believe this was preceded by an episode of Rick and Morty. So people were like, oh, Rick and Morty's over, change the channel to something else, or turn off the TV and go to bed or something. And that's why, and since there's a lingering halo effect, the ratings are still a bit higher. And after that, and more evidence of that is how Eric Andre's show. Eric Andre right now is the second biggest brand that Adult Swim has behind Rick and Morty. I think a lot of people agree with me on that. You'd be like, well, what about Tommy in general? Yes, but Eric Andre has such a massive cult following that I think that surpasses Toonami overall, but is nowhere near Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty hit special heights I don't think any Adult Swim show will ever hit again. More about that, and that dropped to .13. And now note the trend for the next few shows. You have Dragon Ball, which was the same as the Eric Andre. Then you have JoJo's Bizarre Adventure go up 1/100th. Then you have Assassination Classroom go up yet another 100th. And then you have shows kind of plateau, of Fire Force being 100 down, Naruto being the same as Fire Force, and then Demon Slayer just another 100 down. So the back end of the block is basically the same. In fact, Naruto Shippuden actually went up this week, 1/100. But what I think this is that you have people tuning in at midnight expecting, okay, Dragon Ball, Toonami time. And then they see Killer Mike out there. And then they're like, well, what's this? And then you have people go to other channels and they're like, okay, maybe it's a special. And then, like, an hour and a half later, since they aren't actually looking at the specific schedule, they just flip back, which would explain why Dragon Ball's ratings didn't improve from Eric Andre's, but the ratings did slightly improve after that, to the point where, for the first and likely the only time in its run, Assassination Classroom had the highest ratings on Toonami for the night, which is another anomaly quirk of 2020. No, go to tell someone at the start of this year that at some point during the year, for 1 week, the highest rated show on the block was Assassination Classroom. They'll think you're high off your ass. And I would think you would have been high off your ass too, you know. But again, 2020, nothing's been expected. But I digress. And this leads to my worry here. If Dragon Ball is still not a big enough draw where, even with the special, it doesn't keep high ratings, like, the fact that Dragon Ball even hits a .13 should be scary. Especially since Dragon Ball has been the show for the block in terms of establishing ratings for the night. That under any circumstance, even the weird circumstance we got here, it should not be that low. I think it's time that Toonami needs to seriously think about new lead-ins. And you can't do JoJo's Bizarre Adventure because this week's episode is the last episode of the show, which is part of the reason why we get this new schedule. Because, like I said, on Halloween night we get a marathon of The Promised Neverland, thank God, and then so it can't be that. And then another tempting one would be like, well, look at Fire Force, it's new episodes. Well, new episodes of an asterisk because this is on Funimation now already, but it's new to Toonami, so that maybe draw more people who don't want to subscribe to Funimation now and just want to watch it on Toonami and have that weekly experience. But I don't think that's that massive a group of people. And then Shippuden would be like, well, it's like 200 episodes are left to Shippuden. Naruto's a big brand. Ask any person who grew up in the late 2000s. They know who Naruto is, and maybe they're interested in this. Yes, but we've gone so far along with the plot that, I mean, I'm not going to say, oh, it's confusing. It's like, I mean, we're 300 episodes into this. And admittedly, only like 150 are actual canon episodes. But at the same time, especially since a little back, I think like we had like 20, 30 weeks ago, we had that weird mini filler arc, which was kind of just a summary of the show. If there was a time to move Naruto to the lead-in, that would have been it to kind of get people reacquainted with the show. And we've lost that opportunity. So I think Naruto is just going to be off to the 3 a.m. gulag for the rest of its run. 2:30 gulag right now. Demon Slayer, again, rerun, and it's not as established a brand as Dragon Ball. Despite, and I saw somewhere where like Demon Slayer had like this insanely like $40-something million opening weekend. It's filmed in Japan, which I've been told, and I'm not so sure if this is true or fake news or not, that it was like a record for an anime in Japanese theaters all time for an opening weekend. But again, like I said, Demon Slayer absolutely massive in Japan, big in the US, but I don't think big enough that you can be like, well, we should start it over Dragon Ball at the start of the block, which leaves one show, Assassination Classroom. Like I said, it's built something of a following since airing on Toonami. It already had something of a following before it was on Toonami. I found it to be a very accessible show where it's like, again, and like one thing I said to Nami, a big criticism I've had is how they've just been overly reliant on shonen. And you could be like, well, Assassination Classroom basically is a shonen. Yes, but a lot like something like My Hero Academia, there's a lot you can point to and enjoy that's not necessarily a shonen based element. Where I'm not going to say, oh, it's because it's cutesy, but like if you're watching it for the sake of watching a slice of life show, you can enjoy it in that way. And that's one massive asset that Assassination Classroom does have. And considering that we're still like 40 something episodes left, so it's going to be here for another year or so, I feel like it's long enough that you can call it a somewhat of a stable show to lead off the block. But again, that's just my stupid opinion about these things, you know. And next week we get the same schedule we had 2 weeks ago, I believe, where it's like normal stuff again. So like basically a couple weeks ago schedule, but starting at midnight like usual. And then Halloween night, the week after that, Promise Neverland Marathon, and the week after that is the schedule I mentioned earlier. So interesting short-term future coming up for Toonami. Next week, I expect the ratings to rebound somewhat. Like I said, Dragon Ball is not as strong a lead as it used to be, but it's not going to be a 0.13. I expect it to go up to at least a 0.18 or so. And maybe we get a Boeing effect because it is JoJo Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind's final episode. And we do have a tendency of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure actually pulling in higher ratings as we get to the end of each season. And I anticipate that happening again. So I think it's going to be a nice rebound week next week for the block. What do you guys think? What's your opinion on this news, on the ratings, on Toonami's schedule coming up in a few weeks? I love reading your opinions. If you like this content, if you want more Toonami news content like this, please like, please comment, please subscribe. I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.